Have you ever felt the world closing in on you? The noise too loud, the eyes too many, the silence between your thoughts screaming louder than any voice? What if I told you that the anxiety you feel, that tight chest, those racing thoughts, is not just an isolated battle, but the beginning of something darker, something that doesn't just isolate you from others, but from yourself? This video will show you how anxiety doesn't just paralyze, it transforms. It changes the way we see people, the way we speak or stop speaking. And by the end of this, you might realize that the person you used to be isn't the one staring back at you in the mirror, because what starts as fear often ends as silence. And silence, when left unchecked, becomes antisociality. Let's go deeper. You were never meant to live alone inside your own mind. But somehow, that's where you ended up, pacing the corridors of your own thoughts, searching for answers that keep slipping through your fingers. Anxiety begins with a question: what if something goes wrong? At first it's subtle, a knot in your stomach before a conversation, the sudden urge to leave a room full of laughter. Then it grows. It whispers things like, "They're judging you," or "You don't belong here." And eventually, it becomes a command: stay away. From people, from connection, from life itself. That's the first betrayal, not of others, but of yourself. Because the more anxious you become, the more you start avoiding the very thing you crave, human contact. And the less contact you have, the more alienated you feel. Your body adapts to solitude. Your brain rewires itself to expect nothing. You stop needing people because needing them hurts too much. This isn't strength. This is survival dressed as detachment. Carl Jung once said that neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. So ask yourself, are you protecting yourself or hiding from a pain you're not ready to face? Because every time you walk away from a conversation, from a party, from a friendship, you're reinforcing a story that the world is dangerous and the only safe place is inside your own head. But what happens when even that space becomes unbearable? The silence starts to echo, thoughts become sharper. You begin questioning everything, your past decisions, your value, your place in the world. And then comes the worst part. You start disappearing, not physically, but emotionally. You speak less, respond slower, fade into the background while watching others move forward. It's not that you don't care. It's that caring feels like standing on the edge of a cliff, wind pushing hard against your chest, knowing one step could send you falling forever. You stop stepping, you stop reaching, you stop trying. And somewhere along the way, the fear of being seen turns into a desire to be invisible. Antisociality doesn't arrive with fireworks or drama. It sneaks in through exhaustion, through repeated rejection, sometimes even imagined, until you no longer feel like a person who belongs anywhere. Jung believed that we all carry a shadow, parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge, yet continue to influence our behavior. What if your withdrawal wasn't just self-preservation, but the manifestation of a deeper wound you've never dared to name? What if your silence was never about hating people, but about fearing what they might see in you? You begin to notice how easy it is to disappear, not in the dramatic sense, no vanishing acts or sudden escapes, but slowly, you stop showing up. Your presence becomes optional. Your voice, a whisper the world no longer strains to hear. At first, it feels like relief. No more pretending. No more forced smiles. No more guessing if people truly want you around. Alone, you don't have to perform. You don't have to explain why you're tired, why you hesitate, why your eyes never quite meet theirs. But then, something shifts. The silence that once felt protective starts pressing down on you. It's not peace anymore. It's emptiness. And in that emptiness, something begins to stir. A resentment that surprises you. A bitterness you didn't expect. Because while you withdrew, the world kept moving. People laughed without you. Conversations continued. Life unfolded as if you had simply faded out of frame. And that's when the question creeps in. Was I ever Really there? This is where anxiety reveals its final betrayal. It promised safety, but what it delivers is exile. From others, yes, but more painfully, from yourself. You start forgetting what it felt like to be seen, to be known. You begin doubting whether you ever were. Jung spoke of the persona, the mask we wear to fit into society. But what happens when we wear the mask for so long that we forget who we are beneath it? What if the person behind the mask disappears entirely, leaving only silence, suspicion, and distance in their place? That's the moment antisociality takes root, not as rebellion, not as hatred, but as a kind of surrender. You stop trying because trying means risking failure. You stop trusting because trust always leads to disappointment. You stop hoping because hope is too heavy to carry alone. And so, you let go of connection, of closeness, of the possibility that someone might still understand you. But here's the cruel irony. Even as you pull away, you still ache. Even as you build walls, you still feel the loneliness gnawing at your bones. Because human beings are not meant to exist in isolation. We are wired for contact, for reflection, for mirrors in other souls. When those mirrors vanish, we lose our ability to see ourselves. And without self-perception, identity begins to dissolve. You become a ghost in your own life, watching, waiting, but never fully present. Ask yourself now, did you choose this or did fear make the choice for you? One small retreat at a time. There comes a moment when you realize you no longer know how to be around people. Not because you hate them. Not because you're broken or flawed beyond repair, but because somewhere along the way, you lost the language of connection. You forgot how to read the subtle cues, how to respond without overthinking, how to simply be. It's like waking up in a foreign country where everyone else speaks fluently, and you're fumbling for words that no longer come naturally. So you retreat again, not out of arrogance, not even out of fear, out of exhaustion, because pretending to be okay takes more energy than you have left. And here's what no one tells you. Antisociality isn't always a choice. Sometimes it's the body's final defense against a world that never felt safe. Anxiety starts as a whisper, "Be careful," and becomes a scream, "Get out," until one day, you stop questioning why you feel this way. You accept it. You label yourself introverted, weird, broken, too much. And once you name something, you give it power, you stop fighting it. You become it. Jung warned us about this, about how the unconscious doesn't just sit quietly in the background. It shapes our lives without us realizing it. The parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge don't disappear. They grow stronger, in the dark, and eventually they start making decisions for us. Every time you said no to a gathering, every time you avoided eye contact, every time you convinced yourself that solitude was better, you fed the shadow. You gave it permission to rewrite your story, and now you live inside that rewritten version. One where trust is dangerous, where closeness is a threat, where silence feels safer than speech. But deep down, something still aches. Part of you still remembers warmth, still dreams of laughter, still longs for someone who might understand. That ache, that longing, that's not weakness. That's your soul reaching for the light. Because even in the deepest isolation, the human spirit doesn't fully die. It waits, quietly, patiently, for a moment of recognition, for someone or something to remind you that you are still here, that you are still capable of connection, that you were never meant to disappear completely. But healing can't begin until you stop mistaking numbness for peace, until you stop calling silence strength, until you look at your antisocial tendencies not as a flaw, but as a symptom of pain, of fear, of years spent trying to survive inside your own mind. This is the turning point, not grand, not dramatic, just a quiet realization. Maybe I withdrew not because I hate people, but because I was too afraid to let them see me. Afraid that if they did, they'd turn away. Afraid that if they didn't, I wouldn't know how to handle it. So, I chose absence over risk, distance over vulnerability, control over chaos. But what if there's another way? What if, instead of running from the discomfort, you leaned into it? What if, instead of hiding from your fear, you named it? What if, instead of rejecting the world, you dared to test whether it could still hold you? What if the real reason you withdrew wasn't about people at all? What if your antisocial tendencies aren't a rejection of others, but a rejection of yourself? Because anxiety doesn't just make you fear judgment, it makes you agree with it. You start believing the worst things your mind whispers, that you're too much, too strange, too broken. And once that belief takes root, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You act like someone who doesn't belong, so people stop inviting you. You speak like someone who doesn't want to be heard, so people stop listening. You behave like someone who doesn't care, so they stop trying. But inside, the ache remains, because you do care. You just don't know how to show it anymore. Jung believed that the unconscious doesn't distinguish between thought and action. So every time you imagined yourself as unworthy, as unlovable, as fundamentally flawed, you were programming your behavior to match that image. And now, years later, you look around and wonder, how did I end up here? The truth is terrifyingly simple. You built this isolation brick by brick, out of fear, shame, and the desperate need to feel in control. But here's the paradox. The more control you sought over your emotional world, the less power you had over your reality. Because true strength isn't in withdrawal. It's in facing discomfort without fleeing. It's in allowing yourself to be seen, even when you're afraid, even when you feel broken, even when you don't know how to connect anymore. This is where healing begins, not in grand declarations or sudden awakenings, but in small, painful moments of honesty, like admitting that yes, you miss being close to people. Yes, you still want to belong. Yes, you're tired of pretending everything is fine when it clearly isn't. Jung saw this struggle not as pathology, but as part of the individuation process, a necessary confrontation with the shadow. Because until we face what we've hidden, our fears, our wounds, our unbearable truths, we remain trapped in patterns we never consciously chose. Your antisociality was never about hating people. It was about fearing what would happen if they truly saw you. And now, for the first time, you're asking, what if that fear isn't justified? What if I'm not as unlovable as my anxiety claims? What if I could try again? Not to fix myself, but simply to be seen. This is your moment, not to suddenly become social, outgoing, or perfectly healed, but to begin questioning the story you've been living inside, to ask whether your silence has become a cage rather than a refuge, because the human soul was never meant to live in exile from itself, and no matter how far you've drifted, there is still a thread connecting you to the world, fragile, almost invisible, but still there, waiting for you to reach for it. So if this video struck something inside you, if it made you question, reflect, or simply feel less alone in your pain, then say it out loud. Leave it in the comments. Tell me, did this make you see yourself differently? Did it give voice to something you've never been able to name? Because your words might be the mirror someone else needs, and maybe, just maybe, they'll remind you that you are still capable of connection, even now, even after everything.